Hi, everyone. So excited to be here and so excited to have Jason Jurado with us today. If you don't know Jason, he's a wonderful gentleman and a person you should get in touch with just to get to know him and be aligned with him. But that also goes with everybody else in the audience. And, taking the initiative and being proactive and reaching out will get you a lot more than waiting for something to happen. With that said, today's word is transformation. Hopefully, we're all working on ourselves and trying to get better with other people to help them get better, and everybody can get better together. And with that said, want to turn it over to Jason, kind of give Jason an opportunity to kind of share any updates and initial thoughts on transformation. Jason.
Good morning, Don. It's great to be here with you as always. Thank you for inviting me. Such a gracious host always, and this community is amazing, and I love being part of it. Monday mornings, I usually don't join you on Monday mornings, so this is getting started my week off right. So it's interesting. But with that said, the only thing that stays the same is change, and we're changing all the time, whether we want to or not. So today we're talking about transformation, and it's like transformation to me is that dedicated, focused change, and you're changing into something else. Now there's stuff that's just going to happen. It's just going to show up, and then well, obviously we have some time to flesh this out, which is exciting. But it's how you process it and how you deal with it and how you almost take advantage of it. We just started in fall. The seasons change. It just shows up. It comes. You can't just keep fighting it and wanting to stay. You can go to the beach in your bathing suit, but you're probably not going to be the most well equipped to do that at this time, fall. Now in California, we're going to get 100 degrees today. So that's just California being California. But my point is, yeah, so change is going to happen, and how you process it is good. So transformation is really that mindset of this is coming. How am I going to make it to my advantage?
Yeah, for sure. And whether, to your point, whether you're promoting change, you are being affected by outside change. So you're not operating in a vacuum. And it's great to have it the way you want it, but it's not always that way to start with. And I think that's the focus of transformation is where are you? Where do you want to be or need to be your better person? And how do you find ways to integrate those elements that are important to you, but you haven't quite mastered? And usually it's because of you don't know what you don't know, or you're not open to more information or being teachable, whether that's self education, which could be through YouTube, Google. LinkedIn's a great platform for seeing what people are doing, getting to read their story and their initiatives, and also creating a cohort group of people who come together to learn and share together. So I found that to be incredibly valuable, especially on LinkedIn. And with that, there's nobody more valuable on LinkedIn than Kelly. Kelly's been with me and our group and everything since actually, I could tell you, it's January 17th. It sticks in my mind of last year. So now we're on 21 months, which means that, I'd say approximately 500, no, I've had 500 shows in 21 months, but really about 80 weeks in a row of Kelly being here on Thursday. So thank you, Kelly. Kelly was the originator of the Awesome Journey, and also is working with wheelchairs for warriors and doing so many fantastic things. So always glad to see Kelly here, and Kelly will be here this Thursday, and looking forward to a great get together then. We've got Carrie here, who watching chefs on the Food Network making spring rolls. They made some jumpy dishes. Okay, well, I guess the spring part of it makes them jump. And we've got one more that says, here in Texas, it has its own weather. In the start of fall, we had over 100 degrees with heat index. Looks like it will get better soon. Well, it will. And I don't know about soon, but it will get better. I'm always a proponent of that. So Jason, off to a good start. Got comments working, got Restream working. That's about 90% of the battle. And so what's your new thoughts since your last thoughts?
That's great. And like you're talking about all things do change. The weather, it's going to get better soon. It's going to change. And that's the mindset, as you go through, there's that directed transformation. We talked about like focused moving forward. I've got this plan. I'm going to do it. And then there's the caterpillar, and the caterpillar just turns into a butterfly, and it just goes through its process. And I think a lot of times we get so tied up in trying to rush it. It's like, I always go back to the saying, because I love it. Infinite patience leads to immediate results. And so it's the knowing that things are going to happen. And if you try to force them, there's a Chinese, I don't know if it's a story, a proverb, whatever, but it talks about, when a plant's growing, you don't pull it out of the earth to see why it's not growing so fast and put it back, And that's what we do sometimes with transformation, is that we're like, well, it's not happening overnight. So what's going on? And then you stunt the growth, actually, instead of allowing it to happen. And that doesn't mean you sit back and just sit in the shade and wait to get lucky, but you also have to trust the process and know that things are happening and do your part. My mentor said, you have to set your intention, and then the universe has to find you working. And that's what we do with transformation, is that, there's those natural things I'm talking about, but there's also those things that we take control. Before we started, you and I had talked about me in the last 6 to 9 months, and that's been a journey, and it's been a journey of transformation. And I keep changing, keep growing, and I talk a lot about having a flexible and curious mindset. That's what works for me, and that's what I think is the key to this transformation that I've been going through, is being open to what's next. Instead of going, I'm going to double down on this because I really think this is what it is, but I'm not getting the results that I want. I'm not transforming in the way that I want to. I had to step back and say, okay, what do I need to do? Where is my path really taking me? Where's this really going for what I want to achieve? And then once I did that, I was able to actually truly start to transform.
Yeah, that's so key. What it reminds me of how grateful one could be or should be towards failure and rejection. And I know that's difficult for a lot of people to appreciate, because everybody wants to win all the time as much as they can. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that intention. The issue is it never seems to match with reality. And some of my best opportunities came after my biggest failures. Right. And if I wouldn't have failed, I would have probably kept going with it. And sometimes someone has to tap you on the shoulder and say it's time to move on, whether you're ready or motivated to. But you got to thank yourself, if you're in the position you want to be right now, for everything that's transpired in your past, good and bad. Some people say, if I can go back, I change this. But if you change that, you change everything. And you can change tomorrow. I think that's the most important thing about transformation. You can't transform the past. It's in the books. It's a done deal. You could change your perspective on it, right, the way you see it. But, if the Lions won yesterday, which I follow the Lions coming from Detroit, then it's always going to be a win in the books. What happens next week is depending on what the Lions choose to do this week. But the other thing is not taking any one thing too seriously, having balance in your life, because if you're talking transformation, you don't want to talk absolute transformation. Right. Like, tomorrow I'm going to leave where I live. I'm going to leave the people I'm with. I'm going to leave everything I'm doing and start a brand new whatever. That's way too much to handle. And if you have balance, which means you're fortified on different fronts, no one front is going to be the be all end all, right, to what you're doing. And you'll also have support. People have special interests, do a lot better than people who don't. When you can switch the channels and get into an interesting, worthwhile hobby, when you can socialize, keeping busy is the best thing you can do to get business, to build relationships, to expand your reach. And, I think there's a an opportunity to look and review. Some people are stuck in review.
Right.
And the review usually comes to self-criticism. I'm not good enough. Nobody wants me. And you keep listening to your own story, and people can become their worst enemy instead of their best friends. And I think that's where friends and associates come in, is they can give you a little honest advice without hurting your feelings too much, hopefully. And you can trust them. And I think trust in the future, the belief that tomorrow could and should be a better day and will be a better day based on what you invest in it, makes a difference. You know, the example of bamboo always comes to mind. And bamboo is something that grows so slow in the beginning, you can hardly appreciate it. And then all of a sudden it just shoots up.
Yeah.
And how many people leave before something's just about to shoot up because they didn't have the patience, they didn't have the belief, they didn't have the tolerance. And also, how are you attracting or distancing people and opportunities from you? You know, because what you think is how you project, knowingly or unknowingly. And is that something that people want to be around? Because people are here for themselves. You're a stranger until you're not. So you have to earn that appreciation, that respect, that interest. And it's usually by being a go-giver, by putting it out there and just letting it go and not thinking about it. With that said, Jason, when have you found your most transformative moments?
You know, I think as we talked about the past is the past, but as we look back and, you know, there's those moments that stick out, you know, and mine was on like a 7 to 12 year cycle as I look back and, you know, went through my stuff. But, you know, getting out of the Marine Corps, getting out of the military, that was a huge transformation. You know, going in the Marine Corps was a huge transformation, going from, you know, a 17-year-old kid that just graduated high school into that world for 5 years. That was a huge transformation. But realistically, getting out was actually the biggest one, because now I had all this experience, all this training, all this, you know, life rubbed up against life in the most, I want to say, aggressive way. And now I stepped out into the civilian world again. And so that was a huge transformation for me, is like, okay, figuring out where I was at. Both of us have talked about this, you know, where am I at? Where do I want to go? And how am I going to get there? I think those are the three questions you have to ask yourself. So that was a huge period of transition for me. I went through some, about 5 years after that. Let me see where we're at. Yeah, about 5 years after that, I went through a personal transformation. I had some relationship things happen, and that was a struggle. And I was faced with looking at my life from a place of, where am I going and what am I doing? Because I had spent so much time doing what I thought I was supposed to do, and not enough time being me and being Jason. It was like, oh, well, I'm checking these boxes off to live my life the way I guess you're supposed to live it. And I didn't really think about it beyond that. I just said, okay, well, I'll just follow that. That's the rule book, right? You get a job, and you get a relationship, and then you get married, and then you know, so on and so forth. And I was walking down those, but I was walking, not to get too deep here, but I was kind of walking in a fog, because I wasn't really driving that bus. I was just kind of following along. And then life said, oh, well, guess what? You are in charge, and we're going to take all this away from you, because you need to see that you're in charge. And I had to learn some rough lessons. And so 1999 was a huge year for me to really transition into being who I am. That's when I start, and that, you know, through all of that, that's when I really deep down in my studies of Eastern traditions and NLP, hypnosis, all started that year. That was a huge transition, because that is what walked me towards the door that I opened to who I am today.
Yeah, and you know, life has a way of being a teacher in so many different fashions. Yeah. You know, I found that in order for me to grow, I had to extricate myself from where I grew up and who I grew up with, because it was really holding me back based on trying to achieve other people's expectations. You know, I wasn't living my life completely for myself. It was based on approval And once I set off on my own, I only had myself to be responsible for or be accountable to. And it was a lot more fun because if you did mess up, if that's a good way of identifying it, um, you had responsibility and accountability, but you also didn't have to be embarrassed or no one knew you, and you could become a brand new person. I think you might have froze up, Jason. Not sure. Let me see. I'm sure Jason will be back. But yeah, I'd love to hear from the audience what your stories or elements of transformation or even your definition is. So feel free to comment. Everybody I've been working with on LinkedIn is on a journey. Some are into greater transformation than others. But what's really important is just movement and growth. And, look at everything from an academic standpoint as opposed to, something that's, all or nothing. And little things done right over time can compound in so many worthwhile ways. Let me see. Just to go over. Kerry says he's in need of a miracle with his life, needing a better job. Well, Kerry, it's all about, I know it's easy to say and not always easy to follow. It's asking for help, finding people and situations and organizations that can provide that help, and not doing it alone. Everything gets easier when you're teaming up or have a partner to work with. And shows like this, I think, are instrumental in helping people, find their true self and transform into a better self. So with that, again, transformation is a growth opportunity and a growth vehicle. Let me see, I've got a message. Okay, Jason's waiting for his router to come back. And that's the fun thing. If you can create an element of fun in what we do, is the unexpected, the unknown. And in today's age of technology, you cannot be sure of anything, and that keeps you on your toes, makes you pretty versatile, and puts you in situations you may not choose to be in, but you find to be very rewarding in those situations. So, I've always said failure is feedback. And if you take failure as a learning opportunity, it doesn't seem so harsh. And it's better to be directed into whatever you're focused on that's important versus stuck in things that are easy to do, comfortable to do, and take time to make that adjustment. So, the people I've been talking to, were either dead-ended, where they came to a conclusion that where they were and where they were going just wasn't going to be enough. And that really supports the courage to make those changes that you might not have made as soon as you made them or as strongly as you committed to make them. And with that said, we've got Jason back. Well, Jason, glad to have you back because I was almost running out of gas. I do take my hat off to people like Leslie Flowers who, do Think and Grow Rich all by herself on Fridays and does a audio show on Mondays, Mind Over Matter, I believe it is. And naturally that's an audio event, but it takes a lot to do a show by yourself. I've done about 900 and I haven't done one show by myself except for the first bunch of them because, until you can play with or off of somebody, can you get your true value out because you're working in a vacuum when you're by yourself. So catching up, Jason, what's new now?
So talk about transformation. You and I joked about it. I had joked about it before we started that Dave Snell's supposed to be with us today, and he has a client, and he might join us or not. And so we transformed from 3 to 2, and then we transformed from 2 to 1. I really odd. I had a power surge in my house. I was sitting here talking with you, and my light flashed, and I was like, "Uh-oh!" And it flashed like a second time, and I was like, "Wait a minute!" And then it flashed a third time, and everything dropped. And and that's how transformation shows up sometimes. You get those little signals, you're going along your path and some things start to show up and say, "Hey, something's coming, be ready for it." And sometimes all you can do is hold on. That's all I could do was like, okay. But as soon as it went off, okay, I went and checked with my wife. Did something happen, and she's like, "Oh, it flashed and she lost it too." And is something going on in the neighborhood? So you go through that process and you do what you can do. You affect what you can affect, right? And that's the key. I can't just say, okay, well, the power's going to come back on now, and I'm going to have internet now, and sit here, So you have to take that action, and that's what we do in our lives, And sometimes that's a harsh thing to say, but it comes with self-compassion. It comes with saying, you know what, I am taking steps to make this happen. I'm doing, what I can in this moment. And if it shows up, it shows up. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Maybe I'll try something different. So many times we think it's going to show up. Wayne Dyer talks about you keep looking for it to come from the right of where you're sitting, but it's sitting behind you to the left, and it's there the whole time, and you just don't see it because your focus is completely on in front of you to the right. And so but it's there. It's like, I'm just waiting for you to turn. And sometimes that opportunity shows up in strange ways, and that maybe you lose your internet and it brings a new thought to your mind. That's how things show up sometimes. And it's great to be in community. And that's what I want to talk about. As before the universe had me step away, you were talking about it. And I think community is so important, surrounding yourself, because what I was going to say is it's so important to have the right environment. You can't grow something in the wrong environment. And just I always use nature because we're part of nature, and nature just teaches us so many lessons because they're there for us, because it just goes. Nature just happens. We don't try to control it. We don't try to do these crazy things, but within saying it has to be in the right environment to grow. Community is the environment that you're in, and surrounding yourself. Like I'm blessed to be able to have met you and be connected with you, because you have such a wealth of knowledge, and getting to learn from you and just model you and see how you interact and steal some of your sayings, because you've got some good sayings. I like to steal some of those. But that puts me in the environment for my transformation. We've been doing this. I've joined you a while ago and done many shows with you and with Dave and with Leslie and Carl and of course Kelly, and just and on. And I'm sorry I'm forgetting a couple names right now, just in the thought process, but you have all helped me grow. And it's finding yourself in these places that's the right environment for you to transform, and then doubling down and then saying, okay, I am blessed with this experience and this opportunity. What can I do now? And I feel like, and this might seem a little harsh, but I feel that I owe it to all of you as much as to myself to do well, because you all are sharing your wealth of knowledge and you're all giving me this opportunity to grow. And if I was to just, as I said earlier, if I was just to sit in the shade and go, oh, well, it's going to just show up because Dawn has this huge community and they're going to find me and they're going to love me and whatever, that's not true transformation. I have to transform myself within that environment to grow.
Yeah, so well said, and so appreciated, because people don't take into consideration a lot of what they do that they take for granted, or a lot of what they also receive that they take for granted. But Jason's always supporting the show. He's always supporting the people on the show. And you get support from people you support. It's just a natural thing. People like to do things with people they like and trust and see growth. And some people get on at a certain stop, like a bus, and stay on. Some people get off on the next exit. But the main thing is, what do you do when you're doing what you do? I mean, a lot of where I come from is because of the opportunity I had to meet and get to work with my mentor for about 12 years. He turned out to be a billionaire, which was incredible because he never demonstrated any of that. Always dressed down, always was humble, always was modest, was a self-made man who started with a lumberyard and built it into an unbelievable enterprise. And when it came time, and I was the one who created opportunity to say, "Hey, Fred, I think I can take it from here," which was a tough thing to say to someone who gave so much for so long.
Yeah.
And he was very, very supportive. And naturally, I said to him, "Is there anything I can do to repay you?" And I knew there wouldn't be nothing in material amounts. And he said, "Do for others what I've done for you."
Yeah.
Right. And instead of just taking that as a pleasantry, I took that as a commitment.
Right.
Right. Because that would be payment. And I would have respected him and served him. And he was gracious in order to pay it forward to others. And that's what I've done since that day. It was 1999, actually, that I said farewell. I mean, never farewell. We stayed in touch. And he always said, if there's anything you ever need, I'll be there for you. And that was encouraging. And, he set my direction going forward, and it paid off so well so many times because people are always like, "Well, when I make it, I'll do it. When I get it, I'll give it." And they never really get it, and they never really give it. And sometimes when they get it, they still don't give it because they justify that, times have changed, things have changed. But there's something to honor. And there's something to integrity, and there's something, and you don't see as much of it as it used to be, a quality that most people would like to promote is their do-goodness, their ability to bring people in, bring people up, support people who you're with, because, it's like any team, the person who gets there early, stays late, does more than it's expected of them, build a reserve of goodwill. Whether they ever need to tap into it is not as much an issue, and you hope you don't.
Right.
You hope you can keep giving. I mean, it's no different sometimes as a bank account. You keep depositing money or resources into it, and your goal isn't how do I get it out? Your goal is I hope I never need it.
Right.
That it only gets bigger and I pass it along to somebody else. So too many people are majoring in the minors. They're keeping score more than they're playing the game. They rate themselves based on other people's failure or disappointment to make them feel better than they are, versus just being better. And the other element is allowing things to happen. So many times, ambitious, overly aggressive people get way ahead of themselves, where all they had to do was this, but they did this and three other things. And they keep plowing ahead and jamming things in. You ever see people who you have a conversation, it turns out to be a one-way conversation, right? All they're doing is promoting themselves, talking to themselves in a way to justify themselves. And the overly confident, secure people are just, if nothing gets said, that's okay too. They don't need a reward to justify an action. They just keep doing the right actions and the rewards will find them. And if not, they won't anyways. So overdoing something doesn't work. And I think that's where balance is so important in life. And also, Jason was telling me Saturday he took time off with his wife to really spend time with her. Sometimes you got to take time off to spend with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you say, hey, I could do more. I'm still energetic. I still got capabilities. But hey, wouldn't it be nice if I just did nothing except read a favorite book or take a quality walk? And, there's that guilt, that, hey, how do I take off at noon and justify, well, I went to the park and then I visited something that I really enjoyed. But you're feeding your soul, you're feeding your mind when you get away from stuff. And most people is like, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, I don't have enough. And that's really coming from scarcity.
Right.
When are you ever going to get right? Because I've seen in the past people who have achieved what they wanted and found out it wasn't what they needed. As soon as I get my big house, I'll be happy. Well, they get the big house and they're still not happy. And then they get the car, and then they get the membership, and then they get the private schools, and they get all this stuff. And you know what they're creating is a lot of visibility, a lot of, hey, look at my house, look at my car, look at my kids, as opposed to sharing what's important to others. And that's really a competitive advantage people have who aren't small potatoes, who aren't really that critical. And, I've always said no one ever built a statue for a critic, and that will continue to be true, because why take advice from somebody who had never done or will do what you're attempting to do, but qualifies them as an expert or a judge of what you do? So, there's so many dynamics to what we're talking about as far as transformation and different routes to it. And some routes that get you there at one point won't take you there at a future point, right? It's not a highway. It's mostly roads that connect and veer off and pivot to some other place. So looking ahead, what is the thing that keeps you balanced, Jason?
Living my purpose, that's really, and that's what I talk to people about a lot, but truly, and like I've said this before, a purpose doesn't have to be this huge, big, major thing. Finding purpose in everything you do. So, when I wake up in the morning, my first purpose is to get out of bed, and then my second purpose is to feed the cats. So it could be that small, but I have a bigger purpose, and being of service is that purpose, and that's what keeps me focused. That's what keeps me going. Where I struggle sometimes. I mean, I'm human. I tell my wife that I'm very much like a Taoist. Like, oh, is that so? Okay, and just the flow of things and being in the flow of life and stuff. But I have those moments when things upset me, and I have those things when that. And I jokingly tell my wife, I get to be a human. Give me like 5 minutes to be human. I'm gonna be upset about this. I'm gonna be whatever, and then I'm gonna go back, and then I'm gonna know. But really allowing myself to live this experience and to be present for it, and to just know that I'm on the right path. I mean, that's really what works for me, and that's really how it helps me as I go through these. I struggle sometimes with, oh, is this working out? Is this the right thing? Am I doing the right? And part of it is course correcting. Part of it is, hey, let's be honest with ourselves. If this part isn't working, let's change this part. But part of it, sometimes there's a little bit of that doubt that comes in. I'm working with people's mental health. It's very important. But then I'll go to, like, this weekend, I taught at a retreat, and I had several people from the retreat come up to me afterwards and said very kind things about the results that they felt from working with me and stuff like that. And that really helps me double down. That really helps me say, okay, I'm doing the right things. I'm doing there. So there's that little bit of external check that helps me a lot. But I'm an internal person, so I'm very much like, is this working? Are you doing right? So it's just that balance of checking in with myself and checking in with those that I'm working with, and balancing it out and saying, am I on the right path? Is this going the right way? Something I wanted to mention that I wrote down, if you plant a pomegranate tree and you're hoping to get oranges, it's probably not going to work out for you. So I think as we go through these transformations, we have to be honest with ourselves and say, are we doing the things to get the results that we want? And are our expectations in line with that? And if not, let's plant an orange tree. Let's not try to change the pomegranate's inherentness of pomegranateness, as Wayne Dyer says, but let's then plant an orange tree. And I think sometimes we get caught up on that. We try to control things, and we try to look for things like, well, I'm working, I'm doing this, and I'm putting effort in, but is it right effort? In Buddhism, we talk about right effort. And are you doing the things that are going to get you where you want to go? And once again, this isn't blaming. This isn't saying, oh, you're doing something wrong. This is coming from a place, for me, this is coming from a place of my heart, because I want everyone to live their best life. I want everyone to be to have a happy life and to really enjoy this amazing short time we have on this planet. And let's enjoy it. Let's not get drugged down it. And there are times when it's hard to do that. There's times when things aren't showing up the way you want them to, or things aren't showing up and you're not getting the results that you want. And that's a challenge. But because what happens is that leads to, and I'm going to go a little bit longer here, Don, sorry. But
be my guest.
That leads to tension. And everything negative on our planet is affected by tension. Whether it's mental tension, which leads to physical tension, that holding on tension. If you're having a physical issue in your body, if you just focus on that area and just relax it and just breathe, there's a lot of techniques, and one of them is breathing through that area. So if you have a sore shoulder, you imagine that you're breathing through that shoulder. And what it does is it releases the tension that you're holding there, because that's what most challenges come from. And same way in our lives. If there's an area of your life that's not working out the way you want it to, that can cause stress, because stress is just you're reacting to the fact that the thought that you can't handle what's coming up. And that's what stress is. So you have a little bit of like, uh-oh, but then you go, oh, I can't do it. And then that gains and that builds and builds and builds there. So letting go and being present with how things really are will help you release that tension and help you go down that path that you want to go down to get the transformation, to get the life that you want to live.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Jason. I think it's so valuable what you said. And I think that's the benefit. People have the ability to draw people's ideas and thoughts to them. I was listening to the meditations of Marcus Aurelius, right? And he's credited for being a big part of the Stoicism movement. And when you listen to it, it humbles you, because these are truths that were available a couple thousand years ago and still are valid today. I actually saw where, I forget, it was some superstar, maybe it was Ben Stiller or somebody else, who said that it was actually Jerry Seinfeld, who said that he had changed and transformed because of Marcus Aurelius and those meditations, which said, hey, if it's good enough for Jerry, why not give it a whirl? And I think it's also having something special waiting for you, and it could be a good book that you're in the middle of, knowing that it's waiting for you and you're going to be more comfortable and relaxed when you sit down and read it. The other big thing I think that's essential is gratitude. Don't count what you don't have when you could be counting what you do have. So everything good can't be taken for granted or just accepted, because it's fleeting too. They say youth is wasted on the young, and it's true, because until you're older can you appreciate what you were thinking and going through, that if you could go back to when you were 15 right now with the mind you had,
right,
it'd be a whole different world. The little challenges that schoolmates might have created for you would be laughable. The situations that you're worried about would be unnecessary. And you also have to figure, if that's how it was then, what's going to be 10 years from now with when I'm thinking about who I was then. So, I think people take too much ownership of what they don't own.
Mm-hmm.
And they get their feelings hurt when looking back, it was understandable, it was justifiable. And people have to admit that they're not perfect.
Right.
They have to forgive themselves for things that in the past maybe made them ashamed or embarrassed and held them back out of fear of repetition. Like, if I do that again, that's what's going to happen to me again. So I'm going to avoid that again. And pretty soon you're stepping back instead of going forward, and that impedes transformation. So I think it's really about seeing the good where other people don't, not really taking the bad to heart. No one can do anything to you you don't allow to happen, right? Whatever, especially when it's just words. Well, why did that affect me so much? I don't even know that person. I don't even respect that person. But all of a sudden they said something and it made me doubt myself or made me question things. And why did I give that power up? Or maybe I didn't have as much power as I thought. Maybe I'm just a billboard that puts themselves out there as being really strong with nothing to back it up. And these conversations help because here's the beauty of it. When you're talking to somebody, you're hearing what you're saying at the same time they're hearing it. And you didn't know you were going to say it. And when it came out, wow, did I really figure that out? And sometimes you say, did I really say that? That is so unnecessary, or that was so mean in a way. And that's where the other thing that's really hard to say is I'm sorry, is to ask for forgiveness, not run from it. And people who just take responsibility naturally and say, I can see how that could have hurt somebody, what I just said. I want to apologize to everybody out there, even though maybe no one got hurt. No one was asking for an apology, but it says, hey, this is a stand-up person that once they feel or see wrong, they try to correct it, especially in themselves. And you honor that person versus, hey, that person keeps lying and avoiding, and it just really gets to be disrespectful after a while. Or you just know who you're with and now it's your issue. That whole saying is fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me.
Right.
Comes into play because you should have known. It's that I can tell you 100 stories about the scorpion that rode the
frog,
the turtle's back or the frog's back, and it then said, well, you knew who I was when you picked me up. So, it shouldn't be all on me. And I think sharing helps, where you're not the big cheese and 100% of everything. I'd rather be 10% of something huge and something that's sustainable than the big boss, because, that reminds me of the Jurado, the turtle book from Dr. Seuss that I used to read to my kids, that, Jurado built this whole empire on every turtle's back. And eventually when the bottom turtle decided they had enough, there was no empire. He ended up in the mud. So even children's books, and sometimes these fables have bigger meanings than just nursery rhymes, especially when they were written. So context, understanding that there is more to everything if you look for it,
right,
and the ability to have fun. And I think that's the other part of transformation, is find something that, if you're successful, will make you definitely joyful. If at the end of the day, it's not the number, but the feeling that you're going to have. And that's what lends itself to altruism, when you can live vicariously through others and say, that first ice cream cone to a kid who never had ice cream is going to have so much more value to me to watch their face than it is to eat that ice cream cone for myself. And it's like, take what you need and leave the rest for someone else. And too many people are like, give it all. It's like supermarket sweep. And they're more into the game than they into the prize. And actually set themselves in the wrong direction. So here we got Omar. And if you don't know Omar, you should. I got to know Omar over time, and I've seen Omar mature and grow professionally and personally. And, he demonstrates over and over again his generosity, his inclusion of other people. I've been on many shows. Actually, Harvey has learned from Omar, and Harvey gives Beverly, Leslie, so much credit for just some simple advice one day that actually transformed his focus on what he was doing on LinkedIn. Because in the beginning, you tend to do it all because you have the time to do it all. But once something works, it's going to take more time. And meanwhile, all your time is already spread around, and now you got to retract from things versus give yourself more time. And one thing, I was talking to the group last week, And everybody's faced with that. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time. And they honestly don't. And I thought to myself, a long time ago, and I have more time than I ever need. And I truly do, because I reserve that time in case something comes up. In case, and there will be things. There could be family things, it could be
Right.
health things. Once you're running at full speed, it's like redlining. I mean, how much more RPMs can you generate at that level? And it's always better to say, well, just in case, I've got some reserve. You wouldn't run your life with 10 cents in the bank, assuming that anything that comes up, you'll manage. You want to have a little reserve to say, in case something unexpected happens, I'm covered. And knowing you're covered gives you that confidence and security to go forward with what you're doing. But when you're on knife's edge and you're facing credit card debt and all these obligations, and you wonder, what was it worth that allowed me to get into this situation? And I gave up credit cards a long time ago. And it's like, if I can't afford to buy it today, how am I going to afford to pay for it tomorrow and still buy other things I don't need tomorrow? And it's always that wish, well, one day I'll hit it big, or everything I'm doing will work out, and maybe it will. But if you got one eye on your balances all the time, it starts to distort how you appear to others, right? Because your needs, I got to make 10 grand by March or I'm in deep trouble. Well, someone's going to pay that 10 grand price. Maybe you can deliver value, but why wouldn't you want to be a position that it's more important who I'm working with than who I'm making money off of? And I never wanted to make money off of people. I wanted to make money for and with people.
Right.
If someone comes out negative just because you came out with a need that had nothing to do with the relationship or the initiative, and people, again, it comes from your background. Someone modeled something,
Right.
And someone created situations that you grew up thinking were the way to go. And now it becomes an issue later on for you. And that's where having self-education, reading things that are pertinent, because you always know, you hopefully know you're at a crossroads. You don't know how you got there sometimes. You don't know which direction to take. So why not build more knowledge and more information? And, Abraham Lincoln used to do this. George Washington used to do this. And I think that's where books are so valuable. And now there's so many opportunities to read or listen, and the availability. When I was growing up, there was two sources. There was the library or the encyclopedia. And most times the encyclopedia was very cool because you saw pictures and identify with things you would never see. But again, it was printed once a year. And you get an update book every year to kind of keep you up to date. And now everything is in the seconds. So really no one has an excuse. I mean, there's public education, there's community colleges, there's organizations that can be so important. I remember joining that group, that speakers group. It's all over the country. And, I just was so excited to have a group that was there for positive purpose and for each other. So Jason, what are you doing to hone better person skills?
I'm really doubling down on being of service. And, you're talking about Bob Berg and the Go-Giver. That's always been who I am and what I do. And so really doubling down on that. And like I said, of being of service and being present for people and being there. And that's who I am and that's what I do. And I know, and it sounds tricky because, the saying is to be charitable without act of charity in mind. And so by just saying, well, I know if I'm of service, I know I'll get it back. It sounds kind of like, oh, well, but then you're trying to get something back. It's just acknowledging the circle of life and the flow of the universe, and just acknowledging it. You know what? I know I need to be at some point of this, and the point that I want to be at is of being of service, and it shows up. And as you grow that, you grow as well. I started off with showing up for people and being and helping out, trying to like their posts and to be in the community with them and to support them and to promote them. And then from there they said, oh, hey Jason, you want to be on my show? I heard some of your posts, and do you want to be on my show? And then I was on a show with them, and then I really promoted that show. And then someone else would say, oh, I saw you on so and so show and that you're promoting it, and I've got this show that I want, and it just builds from there, because that mentality helps build, and something I do want to mention, because we're getting close to the hour here, is sacrifice. And that's something that I think we don't look out enough. And sacrifice doesn't have to be a negative thing. Sacrifice doesn't have to be, well, I gave up everything I loved to get what I have to do. That's not it. You have to sometimes sacrifice what you think you're supposed to be doing to get what you're supposed to be doing. And that's hard, because we hold on to these rocks thinking that, well, this is what I need, but you don't realize it's actually weighing you down. And by letting that go, you can then grab something new and what you're supposed to have. So sacrifice sometimes of what you think you're supposed to have. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, you talked about technology, and I have to get on my soapbox real quick about that, because technology is an amazing thing, but it's like the internet. You can connect with anyone on the planet that has power, basically. You can connect with all these sources of knowledge. And I grew up, our age is a little bit different, but I grew up going to the library, and that was it. Card catalogs, got my little fingers going in the card catalogs, trying to find stuff, and looking for opportunities to learn. But now we have this amazing tool in front of us, and I'm guilty too. I'm watching those cat videos myself. I'm watching those little puppy animals, videos. What are we doing with that tool? And the reason I thought about this is because the other day I was thinking about how we're talking about, this is kind of off topic, but it'll tie in, the quote unquote self-driving cars. Someone was like, oh, well, my self-driving car didn't pay attention. And it's like, the whole purpose of these cars being self-driving are to protect you, to take some of the burden off of you. It's like when you probably remember when cars didn't have power steering, going from that to power steering was like, yeah, that didn't mean you're supposed to go out and do donuts in the parking lot because you can turn easier. It was supposed to make it easier for you. This is supposed to make driving safer, but what do we want as humans? Well, I want it to drive for me. I want it, and it's like, that's not the purpose of this tool. This tool is to help you so you can then get better and you can do more instead of doing less. And that's like the internet. So take advantage of the tools that are out there for you. Take advantage of programs like this, these LinkedIn Live programs. I'm not saying necessarily the ones I'm on, but your shows, Don, give so much value because of community, because of the knowledge, because of the wisdom that's shared, the insight. People have, just you alone, they have 4 days of great information to get and to be a part of a community and to help themselves grow. Take advantage of those tools. Don't just go, oh, it's another show. There'll be one tomorrow. Take a minute, make the time for your education. We don't have an infinite amount of time, but it's what you do with the time that you do have that matters. Part of that is taking time off, like you mentioned. I'm a firm believer in that. Schedule some time off so you can recover. You can't pour from an empty pitcher, as they say, but schedule time for learning. Schedule time for learning new things as well and growing. And you'll be thankful because you'll see your transformation start showing up even more.
Yeah, that's so valuable. And I hope people are taking note and making notes because this could help in a little way that could also help guide you in a bigger way. And I think what Jason mentioned about supporting other people is you got to earn your spot on the team. It's like the NFL draft, right? They're figuring out who to pick, and it's usually based on past performance. But a lot of teams also put a lot of emphasis on personal integrity, right? You could have the greatest receiver who's always getting arrested, always getting into trouble. And, you can look at that and say, well, I can get some more yards per game, but you're also going to be bringing somebody into a team with those lack of qualities that you're focused on. And we talked about this on past shows. salespeople are usually the highest paid people because they generate, in most cases, the value that a company needs. But the misnomer is there's a lot of salespeople who are awful people, you know? And most companies, like, they're the sacred cow. Well, if we fire Jim, we're going to lose 40% of your sales. Well, if you fire Jim, the other team members will appreciate it because they don't have to deal with some bully or somebody who takes the spotlight. And you can't build on sand. You know, it's better to build on rock, have a foundation to what you're doing. And really, once you have the group, stick with it and build it. Too many people are using people as stair steps. Well, I'll be with them until I can get this, and then I'm leaving them for that. Well, what you might be leaving somebody for may be less than what you already have. And you're also not taking into consideration all the people involved. They're not things. You know, they have feelings, they have emotions, they have families, they have futures. What are you doing to kind of lather all those things up? I mean, I read the story of Desi Arnaz, and most people don't know who he is, but he was part of the Lucy and Desi process, and became huge. They're the first ones to own their own studio, Desi Lou, but he got so worked up that he ended up with all kinds of stomach issues, ulcers. His life was miserable. And at one point, he decided, I'm going to just take time. His favorite hobby was fishing. And he would give everybody the direction when he went fishing for the weekend, had some fishing buddies, that don't contact me, whatever. I'm fishing. And someone says, well, what happens if the place burns down? And he says, well, that's what the fire department's for. You call them first, you know, and I'll figure it out or find out. And it's drawing lines and not having blurry lines. You know, if you have a commitment to certain people, you must maintain that, or those people aren't going to support you or respect you. And sometimes you got to say, I got to pass up a speaking deal because I've got a wedding I need to go to, or I've got a birthday that's important to me. And, you know, most people say, well, you know, you're sacrificing your future. But again, is your future based on superficial relationships that pay you transitory money? Or is it built on relationships that could last you a lifetime and support you in so many ways? Another thing, I know we're coming up on top of the hour with transformation, is positioning. You know, how you transform as a kid, as a young adult, as a more mature senior person is vastly different, you know, and you got to know when it's time. You know, how many people are way too old for how they look? You know, the one guy who has one strand of hair and he circles it around like spaghetti to make like he's got more hair, or the person who's dressing way beyond their position. It's embarrassing, but it's really people who can't let go, people who are like struggling to stay in a position that's already passed them by. And the other thing is, what do you need to be happy? I mean, need. And most of the time, it's just a roof over your head, food to eat, some clothes. Those aren't that hard, you know, and it also gives you the luxury of, hey, if I don't got to make it, I don't got to do it. So who am I actually working for? That bigger mortgage payment, you know, or the opportunity to take more vacations with my family, you know, or spend more time with my pets, whatever it is, you know. And I think that's the soul searching people can do for transformation, is do a balance sheet. Here are all the positives. There's all the good things in my life that I already have. First thing is, how do I maintain them? That should be primary. And then how do I optimize them? And then work should be a means to an end. Like, once I know why I'm working and who I'm working with and for, then I'll determine how much I make. And what people don't understand is they use what they're having and doing and getting as the baseline. And what says you can't do 10 times that well? doing it something else. So, they do say fear of loss is a greater motivator than greed. People fight like hell to keep what they got, but to get more, well, I'm okay. It'll wait. So we're almost at 59:43. It always goes fast with Jason and really a lot of the people that are here on a regular basis. And you can tell my focus is on the people I'm always working with. It used to be who's the newest person, who's somebody I can get on the show. But I'd rather develop stronger, deeper relationships with a small group than a bunch of superficial relationships that really have no meaning or value just for show. So, Jason, final words?
I had a little bit longer, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so I'll go to the short part of it. Paraphrasing Salvador Dali, he says that he woke up every morning in awe of what that day's Salvador Dali was going to accomplish. And if you have that mindset, because change is going to happen, my friends, why not make a transformation in your life? Why not take advantage of that change? And every day, ask yourself, what amazing things am I going to do today? And look at life from that viewpoint. And you can't help but just smile, and it makes things a little bit better.
Yeah, and even the bad makes you appreciate what you had that was good. So there's, semantics are kind of squirrely. Don't get caught in the words, get more involved in the meaning and bring meaning to your life and others, and you'll live a more successful life than those who don't. So with that said, I'll let everybody get on their Merry Monday and become everything that you hope you can be. And hopefully this little discussion on transformation will guide you on your way. So appreciate all of you. Come back tomorrow. We've got Beverly Glazer and Lance A. Slayton, who's been with us quite a bit, working on the word stress. So that should be interesting. And actually, Thursday is Balance with Kelly. So Jason, thank you so much. Thank you, audience. I can't thank you enough. So we'll have to keep doing this again so I can get more thank yous out there. That said,